your time. My name is Frank Agurto-Machado. I'm one of the senior sales engineers that support our West Coast accounts. Little history, I may have been doing this for a while, been around since VeriSign, came here as a green support rep, and then kind of worked my way up to being an SE, and then I've been an SE ever since through Symantec and until now. So I've seen a very interesting, lot of changes in our industry, a lot of good changes. There was a lot of questions about us coming over to DigiCert from Symantec and through VeriSign, and a lot of great things came from that. And what you're going to see today is kind of the evolution of that interface. So this is what we call DigiCert One. Mike talked about it pretty extensively. It's a single platform, multi-tenant. We offer multiple deployment methodologies. And again, I'm going to do my best to stay out of the rabbit hole today. So on some of these things, I may just high level, but if there are questions, we can dig into some details. And again, some things we could just take offline if there's deeper questions about some of the things we'll go through today. Like Mike said, we offer a lot of different, we call them containers or managers. But the reason we do that is because there's such a plethora of functionality in each one, and different certificates can be distributed. But at the same time, customers may not need all this. So software companies may not be so much into the IoT trust more as the medical industry might. And again, then we get into the trust lifecycle piece, which is actually the end, what we like to call end-to-end PKI. And this is very important because when through the VeriSign days up until now, we used to separate those. We had the TLS model or the SSL model, and then we had everything else PKI. And now we can bring it all together. We can create microcosms of policies, and I say that as a positive term, of policies, so that way I can have one distribution of certificate types separate from another, and that also dictates everything from key usage all the way through notifications. And then what we also do is we unify all that into a single dashboard. Customers who use these accounts typically are on subscription type contracts because you no longer run into the 5 p.m. I'm out of certificates on a Friday night and everybody's scrambling to get things working. Rather, what you're doing is you're constantly always having an abundance of certificates, and it's about what you consume. And your consumption is seen very easily through the dashboard, everything from the most important pieces to those certificates expiring. The key to remember here is that we're CA agnostic when it comes to the discovery of certificates, whether it's through a service entity or it's directly through a network discovery, we're completely CA agnostic. So all those certificate functions you're seeing there, those expirations, could be other vendors as well. And you can also have notifications sent out to folks, either PKI administrators or other folks related, maybe in some way, shape, or form to those certificates. And we also track it by vendor. And of course, at any time I can click on these, and it's going to always take me into a singular inventory. Before I leave here, just a couple of quick notes is we allow, obviously, business units. We call them business units. You can just call them generally work groups. So I can look at the consumption level based on maybe specific work groups. If finance is doing something more than IT or whatever it is, I can track those as well, and those graphs will adjust accordingly. No matter what I do, it will always bring me into a single inventory or a single proof of record. Now, this is important because everything we're doing as a unifying strategy, we're not trying to dethrone services. We don't want AWS gone. We don't want you to remove your Microsoft services unless you want to. The key is we make it a choice. And if the customer wants, and I see some laughing because I've had customers saying, no, I don't want to do that anymore. Where other customers is just help me corral the cats. So we offer both options there. If customers want to build off the Microsoft infrastructure without the use of additional funds to build out that infrastructure, you could take advantage of Trust Lifecycle Management. As you can see here, I have different views. There's some system views that we give you, very straightforward stuff. If we're discovering things, certificates expiring in 30 days, just kind of as a quick example, you can see those certificates that are expiring. If I want something more out of that, and remember, single proof of record, so if I want something more out of that inventory, I could start building an extensive column list or an extensive list that maybe I'm going to create into a report, and maybe I'm going to distribute to certain personnel, whether it's C-suite, contributors, whatever it is. I have those options of building out those columns, and I can save those views, or I can create custom reports. And the nice thing about the reports is I can set them up on a frequency. So now I'm getting them once a month. Maybe I want them once a week. Whatever it is, I have a lot of functionality to play with here. But it's kind of I always like to tell customers is top down, left to right. No matter what you do, one, you're not going to break it. Two, it takes you very quickly with minimal learning curve into getting that solution established and moving. And again, for your own policies or however you're going to deploy things to folks inside your environment. Okay, so that's a singular inventory. Again, we have multiple views. As Mike talked about earlier, as we start getting closer to things like automation and so forth, I always like to say it's a skeletal structure. You can't just find a bunch of certs in here and say, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to do automation and I'm done. You've got to have, I always like to tell customers, it's the head bone to the neck bone to the backbone. And once you build out that structure, things start falling into place and you can take certain facets of what's in the solution and you can point it to multiple things. Like Mike talked about discovery, we require an application to be deployed that's outbound communication only. So what that means is DigiCert never comes into the customer network. Rather, those strategically placed gateways, or what we call sensors, will talk to your account only, and their job is to do multiple things. I like to say they're the Swiss Army knife, and you pick and choose what attachments you want in there. And again, what happens is a lot of magic happens here. You start getting certificate types, you start getting maybe even different assurance levels. Maybe there's DV certificates deployed into the enterprise. Maybe it's all OV or EV, whatever it is, you can start tracking those, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a network discovery. If I'm using AWS, and I'll talk about this in a minute, we can use one of our connectors to talk to AWS without eating up bandwidth across the enterprise network to find out what those certificates are. In fact, we can do it on a regular schedule, whether it be hours, days, weeks, whatever it is, I can keep pulling that service. And we do this in a uniform method with all our connectors. So that way the learning curve is very minimal for the customer, and all they have to do is inject the connector, and it can, again, make sure there's a sensor out there.
Sorry, that's an interesting one. So that means that you're leveraging API on, with some sort of access that is being created for you by the customer.
Yes.
To go and, create, pull that on a regular basis.
There's a yes and no to that. So yes, we leverage APIs because the foundation of DC1 and all these other containers are API based. So the transactions are always API. But at the high level, when we have connectors live inside the TLM. The network sensor lives inside the customer's network. And the connector, because it's outbound communication, that sensor has to heartbeat in and it asks for a work flag. And at that point, we tell it to go check those things.
Okay. And I was aiming at AWS just as an example. So how would that work in that sense? Because you just said that,
sure,
it's not going to be, it's not going to be involve the customer in a sense of traffic that it's being either generated or somehow related to what they're doing internally.
Sure.
What I understood from what you said was, okay, we're just going to pull the customer stack on AWS and figure out, which certs, the load balancers would hold, and possibly servers and whatnot, and then be able to, visualize all of that in our platform. Did I get that correct?
Somewhat, yeah. So we take the footprint information to get into the service, and then from there, we're polling it accordingly for certificate information. So there is API usage in the realm of communication between how data is being sent to us from the network sensor, but the network sensor is going out based on login information and making contact with the service to get updated CMDB, whatever certificates are out there.
I'll try a different angle, and again,
sure.
I'll stop if that's something that I just keep I keep missing out. So do I as a customer, do I need to set up access for the platform to go in and pull my stack?
Correct.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's because we can obviously go into some detail on that. Every connector requires login information. And again, depending on the service you're connecting to, obviously the footprint is slightly different.
Now, I had a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Kavelina, and I may or may not have missed this, so I apologize. So in addition to being able to integrate, pull all that data and have real-time view, is this also something, if you're seeing what certificates are there, like getting ready to expire, like right now, I currently, we use Logic Monitor. So Logic Monitor gives you, you have 30 days, 10 days, whatever.
Right.
Is this something that will act like that, but also be able to do like a certificate renewal from the dashboard? I'm just, because again, I may have missed that. You may have.
So, no and yes.
Okay.
So, no, in the sense that the connector is not regulating notifications going out.
Right.
That goes deeper into what we call the policies when you start setting up your profiles, because you'll pick and choose your notification policy. You'll pick and choose exactly how you want that model to look, whether it's automation or manual enrollment, whatever it is. What the connector does is it goes out on a regular basis and it pulls for the CMDB information and it updates that. Like Mike was saying earlier, how it was consistently updated. You set a schedule as you're walking through this. And I mean, obviously I don't have this information, but as I go into the next screen, it'll start asking me, well, what do you want to see? Do you want to see certificates 4 years back? Do you want to see all revoked certificates or all expired certs? So you can start grabbing lots of data. There's not really a right or wrong way to it. Maybe it's de facto. Most customers just want to see what's currently in there.
But on the actionable side, and I'm with you on that. So Mike did mention that, for example, with Microsoft, you would be able to take actions on your certs.
That is correct.
So maybe try to elaborate a little bit on that.
Sure. So whenever you have, so as an example, so let's say I have Intune. Okay, so I have my Intune connector is up. So what I have here is all my enrollment data. That's not the best connector. I'd want to look at, let me look at Azure. So as an example, once again, all the connectors will do this. They'll tell you what assets are found, and it's going to consider it as crypto assets. And so if I have managed certificates, all those will show up in there. Those could be certificates that are maybe I'm already renewing through the Azure Key Vault. But if not, then I'll go find my discovered certificates. And again, depending on where they're deployed is the level of management that I'm going to have. So as an example, if I have it on an IIS node, let's just say for giggles, it's sitting on IIS somewhere, then I could start taking advantage of renewing those certificates because an agent lives on the server or the image where I could start telling it, yeah, go ahead and automate that certificate. So it goes back to kind of the skeletal structure piece where you have to have certain things in place to take certain actions against those certificates.
So just a comment, and I think that it helps me understand, and I assume that it will help others.
Sure.
So if there's a requirement, for an agent plus certain level of access, it's worth mentioning it.
Sure.
Also with the other providers, and if there's a difference between them, worth mentioning as well.
Correct, and good feedback. And again, so I'm giving you guys a high level. So we do have in our docs.digicert.com, we have everything collectively in there for all our solutions, Cert Central, DC1, and it does walk them through top down. The solution gets technical very quickly. So what we do with customers is if they're not going to do a proof of concept, then we usually bring in our professional services that will either do consultation or work with them on site to do deployments into production. SCs, typically, we don't go into production to do deployments. Rightly so, we shouldn't, but we do act as their front line of support doing proof of concept. And we work with them with all their use cases and things like that. And again, I'm just kind of jumping around, so I'll show you more what that looks like.
So quick question. What, on average, when you're working with enterprises, what is the percentage that you're actually able to fully automate versus only detect only?
Yeah.
So the percentile of automation, I don't know if you have a better number than I do, Mike. I don't, there's not one exact number. I would say it's at less than 50.
Okay.
And the reason being is
that's what I was assuming.
Yeah.
Because, I'm thinking to myself, this is great for AWS, Azure, because they've got the APIs available to you. But
sure.
The ones that are always part of the fire drill are the Palo firewall that has a cert for Global Protect, or the, switch down the road that you want to have a secure management interface.
Sure. Or any of the ones that aren't self-signed, or any of the ones that aren't self-signed.
Right.
And that's not to take up your time, but that's why I was asking, because you're always, in any environment, at least that I'm still going to see, you're going to have the ones that are auto-signed, cool, they're out of the way. The ones that aren't self-signed, you get the alert. And it's more tedious. So you had mentioned with being able to automate these tasks, is that something, roadmap that can't be discussed, or are we going to get to that?
Right.
Where we
Well, and it depends on the protocol you're using too. Like with some of these, you may be left to SCEP or EST as opposed to ACME. ACME has a pretty decent grasp on things, but the reality is we have legacy switches or legacy routers. If we're deploying, Active Directory controllers, we can talk to them. We can actually do deployments.
So you brought up ACME. I love ACME on where I have it. What's the industry looking like when it comes to, that becoming a standard for all the things instead of just, a little bit here, a little bit there, because it works great. but it's never on the app, on the tools that I actually want it to be on.
Yeah, everybody doesn't do it. I mean, there isn't, and again, Mike, I don't know if you have better information on that, but I don't have any one thing that says, okay, Cisco's embraced Acme
No,
as
but
opposed to
it's
Palo Alto.
growing significantly. And I would say a lot of this stuff, like I think, Frank, I love your skeleton analogy on automation, right? Because automation is not something, there's not a button in our platform, you just say automate everything, right? I mean, it's an effort. And I talked about the different parts of the certificate lifecycle that you need to automate, right? There's processes where organizations, it's really a crawl, walk, run approach. And we're starting to see that evolution as organizations are doing, but there's no easy button on it, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to be strategic in where you start and how you migrate into that. But we do have some organizations that are very far down that path and are doing significant amounts with automation, but it takes effort and it takes a planned out approach.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. So, and again, to the point of APIs, I should clarify on that. Customers aren't having to do API deployments with this solution. You can if you want to. If there's something not in the connector field or in the connector base there that they want to use, could you use a REST API deployment to create enrollments, to create deployments? Sure, you can. But out of the box, customers aren't having to do API deployments. The goal is ease of use. Even as SEs, when we step in on the proof of concept model, which I'm showing you here today, they work off our demo platform. We work with them on deployments. We are their first line of support. We take all their use cases into consideration, and then we work with them on deployments accordingly. And to that point, I'll come back to some of this in a little bit, but because I'm throwing a lot about policy and a lot about functionality and usage and things like that. So if you guys can see that, let me see if I can make that a little bigger. I'll leave it right there. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to start messing with things. In our base templates, we provide all our use cases for what customers are doing. And so what they do is they work through their use case and it'll start to build the profile. I talked about this a little earlier. So let's just say I had one of these that I'm going to deploy. For those that may not see a name in there, we offer generic profiles. So if you're doing maybe, I don't know, if you have to deploy a generic SCEP certificate, you're working with Jamf or something like that for user certificates, we offer generic profiles. Very easy to build off of, very easy to use, but the one thing we can offer is public and private trust. And the way DC1, I'll say holistically is the platform, the way it positions things is that all this now becomes functionality for the customer. So you're not forced to only go public or private only or vice versa. You can have all the above. You can have user certs, you can have entity certificates, and then of course we talked about other things like code signing. But as an example, I'll just go into one of my I always call it Frank's trustable stuff, but you trust me. My kid does, but private SSL certs, again, I've created this profile. I pick and chose everything I wanted in there, but I walked through that process and I got to the point where I have enrollment URLs because this is going to be a manual approval model. So, and I'm going to do a manual enrollment. So now I have an enrollment, that URL I can hand out to the masses, whoever I'm working with, or I can create it based on automation. If I want to use automation, in this case, let's say Acme, I would decide if I want DigiCert's automation or if I want third-party clients, when Acme, acme.sh, whatever you choose to use there. But the difference with DigiCert's managed automation is, and I'll stay away from too much detail, is we're not requiring the customer to create the key ID, all these things, the identifier, grab the URL, manually throw these into a long entry. Rather, we'll do it for them. So it may take maybe on average a few seconds longer. All the customer's doing at that point, like what Mike said, at that point, because the skeletal structure is established, all I'm doing is clicking go and the automation is taking place. And I'm getting to see those certificates that are being automated. And the way I can do that is a multitude of different ways. I'm just kind of jumping down, so feel free to ask questions. But as an example, so I'm just going to go right to my agents because I have an agent deployed on one of my images. And to give you an idea of kind of the lightweight usage model on this is all running off my laptop. This is obviously the demo platform. It's a multi-tenant model, but the images of my IIS, my Ubuntu sensor, all these things, I'm running them off my laptop. And I run them for all my demos because I don't want to rely on other services. I like to do everything from my machine. So if it crashes, it's all my fault. But at the same time, I've got sensors running on a system at home. They're very lightweight. They're just doing their thing. They chime up every few minutes. I like mine to chime in much faster. But again, it's all that outbound communication. And again, as you can see here, I have options to renew the certificate. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that today, but because it could take away from this. But as you can see here, I get a lot of options to play with that certificate. I can revoke it. I can renew it. I can do whatever I want. I could just request a new one. Fine. I don't have to follow the whole renewal model. I can tag the certificate. I can keep it away from other business units if I want to. So as I start to let more administrators into my platform, maybe I don't want them seeing what the other divisions are doing. I can separate those records.
So you're sort of talking about multi-tenancy here.
Yes.
What do you have a model where you're seeing MSPs using this to help their customers?
Not as of yet.
Will you?
This is, more than likely, yes, over time. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I can tell you, we do have
detailed.
MSPs right now that are
Yeah.
actively doing,
Yeah.
that are starting to do that. It's something that's, it hasn't been going for a long time, but
Yeah,
we do
because
have
one of the things
MSPs.
that we're seeing in the industry is that we have a lot of small to medium enterprises that need this,
Yep.
but can't afford the full kit and caboodle.
The infrastructure.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've looked at various companies over the years to try to fill that gap, and
Sure.
we're always impressed by the demo, and then we start looking at the dollar signs and go, that's not going to work for 90% of our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. MSP is a really good model for where you see a lot of efficiencies and value with the multi-tenancy approach.
Correct.
So for the
Thanks, Mike.
federal government that is going to the CMMC portion, cybersecurity maturity model certification,
Mhm.
do you see how this could help an organization be compliant with that specific type of certification?
I'd say it depends, Brian. Mike, you want to answer? Depends on what level of it, because there's certain things that we're
The
have to be
controls that
RA.
you have around, and I didn't spend a lot of time on this, but I think it's worth emphasizing, is policy enforcement. So the way you become compliant with policy is by having a system that allows you to enforce policy. You set the policy and then you enforce it. Traditional cryptography management doesn't do that. It's like tools just kind of spit certificates out. You know, we have very defined profiles, so you can limit profiles. You can set policy in the platform and then enforce it through not providing it as an option. And so yes, it does help organizations get better control, tighter set governance policies that are reflective of regulations or industry standards, and then you enforce that. So it does allow our customers to get better control and be more compliant with various types of industry standards and regulations.
Okay. Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. So again, and I think it goes back to, because there's a lot out there when we're starting to reconcile all that data. And what happens is we bring it to the inventory, and it tells you, and I wanted to show you this because I'm not really using this one anymore, but we don't just show the positives, we show where there's failures. And then again, we provide reporting and logging so customers can view those audit logs to start tracking that data. And we do this across all our containers. Whether you're doing code signing as a service, we provide signing logs and just normal access logs to the account, all the way through our IoT and document trust as well, with things that are passing and failing. So there's always, for the customer, it's always very easy to come in here and start taking actions against those certificates. And again, I'm just kind of showing you what this looks like quickly. I'm not going to hang out here, but this gives you an idea how easy it is to correct those models if they do fail. Okay, I can find out if it's a connectivity issue, I can retry it. And if I start seeing issues there, then at some point, I'm going to go look at the service, or maybe I'm going to go look for that node, depending on what that certificate's being deployed to. There might be network rule changes, whatever it is. But quickly, I can adapt and overcome to those hurdles that are being thrown at me because my certificates aren't automating correctly, or whatever those issues are. Quickly, you can find out why certificates are failing, ease of deployment, things like that. And again, we'll kind of go back to connectors. I didn't really talk about that too much, but I said this earlier, and Mike said it as well, but the discovery is not always in the network. We do offer network scanning. You can use network scans if you want to. They're extremely powerful, but they're going to be limited. So you're only going to think of network discovery. I always like to say it's 3 basic steps. Are you there? Were you listening? Can I talk to you securely? So if you ever on a presentation with me, when I'm talking to customers, I always say it's a non-intrusive scan. We're not going nuts looking for open sockets and just saying, well, will somebody listen up? We will find open sockets, and then we'll only see if we can invoke a certificate from them. If we can invoke it, and this is where it's non-intrusive, then great. But if we can't, we're still going to tell you, I found an active socket, there's just no certificate there. So at least you know if that socket is open, that means an audience might potentially have access to that socket as well. Okay, but what the connector does differently, and I'll talk about agent scanning as well, is what it does is it says, look, while you're at it, I'm connected to the service. Tell me what you're doing. Let me see your CMDB. And it brings all that data back into the inventory. What an agent does as well, on that same note, is an agent will also do an agent scan. It'll say, hey, while I'm on this system, would you like me to tell you what certificates are there? And I can tell you what's going on out there, certificates that are just sitting out there. It could be, like on this one, I have certificates sitting in a trend micro directory. Whatever it is, I have a bunch of certificates out there with no common names on them. They're just sitting out here. So now I know I can easily take that data, give it to my Windows team, desktop engineers, whoever they are. And again, I'm still in a proactive role managing those certificates. Maybe they're fine. Maybe they're just staying there for a reason. Maybe it's mutual authentication. Who knows? But the bottom line is, from a single console, very easy to navigate, very easy to make quick decisions on how I want folks to maybe go look at those certs. Maybe I want to take those certificates down, whatever it is. But again, as you can see here, we can do system scanning. I always like to say on the machine or on the network. We offer both. I'm going to start to kind of wrap up there, unless there's anything, Mike, you want me to cover? Anything more we need to dig into? Any other questions?
So is there a view that is, more comprehensive, but has like more visual kind of view to it? Because other than the list, can you, kind of create an architecture diagram that you can actually show? I just go back to what you said, with the different parts, of the organization. And again, I love that analogy, but I would love to have a visual representation of that other than a list.
You mean like an actual consumption graph or?
Yeah, something like that. So I can see, again, for, the untrained eye looking at this, I see okay, there's a ton of hosts connecting to that particular service. That cert expiring would have a far more impact than something else that is serving, I don't know, just a bunch of hosts. Let's try to keep it very simple.
Sure. So there's, again, I take the middle of the road, and Mike, I'll let you chime in on this as well. There's a yes and no to that. So my account's a demo account. So it's good for what it is, right? Show a quick couple of oohs and ahs and it's great. But when you look at other customers' accounts who've been consuming over time with TLM, this graph will get much larger. So to your point, there's a yes, the certificate usage over time will get larger. It'll show dates. It'll show you what's exactly happening there. If there's expirations, failures, revocations, whatever it is. But that graph on some customers is massive. It's all over the place. And it's great because they're tracking it. Today, we don't manipulate. We don't let customers go in there and create their own graphs, per se. They can see the existing graphs that we found through our customer panels, which we've built so far. And then of course, that's ever evolving. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I love the idea. I'm interested. I actually haven't had discussion with product or customers on that, but I do think, because that's very actionable data, right? And so as we're priding our platform on that, that's something I'll certainly take back and have a discussion. I'm sure because we do, having meaningful, actionable data is critical, and that's what you're talking about. And so that's a really good point that we'd love to. I'll go back with our product team and love to follow up with you.
And just a last comment on that. So we had that, short conversation about, the audience, whether it's, technical audience and it can be executives. But I think once you have that visualized,
sure,
I think you can get the same understanding across the board.
Oh yeah.
You don't have to be a professional to understand. We have a lot of, that actually can be a big risk, to let that certificate expire over there.
Yeah.
Or, I had no idea that we had so many certs that, are just running around somewhere and it's not managed in a central location. So that can be something that is a quick win,
No, it's good
for everyone.
feedback. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
All right.
And I think it's important to, this spans the portfolio of certificates also. This kind of management and actionable data is critical for public trust, private trust, and all of the different use cases to have this level of granular control. And that's where, management of trust really is the future of where things are going. Establishing trust, we're pretty good at that. And organizations are better at that, but we really need the world to begin evolving in the management and to be better on that. And that's where we're focused on helping our customers.
There we go.
Other questions?
Yes, sir.
Looking ahead to post-quantum, I'm just curious how you see it rolling out, sort of what's going to be the precipitating driver to get folks to embrace it, and are there particular sectors that you think might be driving it?
Yeah, I think government's going to be a big driver. Government always drives industry. There's CNSA has already put out timelines for migration to post-quantum cryptography. Those are publicly available. I don't have the slide today, but we have those available. Those timelines will drive adoption.
Right.
And I think you'll see, of course, like every other migration and security, you'll see critical infrastructure. I think we're already seeing a lot of uptick in financial banking. We're seeing governments, even in healthcare, we're seeing some adoption. We're monitoring use on our quantum toolkit to see who's using it, who's beginning to test. We haven't made that data publicly available yet, but there is some data out there on adoption, and it's pretty impressive to see in the last 6 months how many organizations have started testing with post-quantum algorithms. And so, we're not out there making predictions on when quantum computers will come, but I think the timelines we refer to are what CNSA has put out.
Or, just to try to pivot that a little bit. Once, it's out there, right, then everyone will start to panic.
Yeah.
You definitely want to be on the side that we've done some work in the field. We kind of understand, what we need to deal with.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, I know Christina has worked this week there was a news article, I don't know if anybody saw, but man, that has sure generated attention. Christina, I don't know if you want to make any comments just on I will just say, I know that it's created a tremendous buzz in the industry, so it shows that people are paying attention to it. But people are also seeking for answers, like, is this real? Is this real? And so we've put some public statements out. We believe people need to be aware that it's coming. And there is no risk to beginning your migration planning today. And the earlier you begin, the better prepared you will be, because it's going to take time. As I said, the transition from SHA-1 to SHA-2, I mean, I was in Australia recently and talked with a bank that literally took 8 years for their full migration from SHA-1 to SHA-2. It takes time because it's so embedded, it impacts so many systems. So you need to begin the migration and the testing and the planning today. And this article that came out, it's a testament to that. I mean, we don't know when they're going to show up. So begin planning today is our message to the world.
And as you can see here, I just showed the CA manager really quick. That's also a staple container that comes in here. Customers have a lot of choices here with the CA manager. They can upload their existing key pairs. If they want to offload the pressure on their existing ecosystem, we could take them for them. This is all DigiCert-based owned HSMs. These are not third-party ran. We use third parties, obviously. Talos is our poison of choice. They're great in the industry. They've been working with us on PQC from the beginning. And as you can see, I've created my own set of PQC routes. I've put them in the Cappy store and others, and they don't show up yet, but it does work. But we do allow customers to test with post-quantum if they want to. We have a couple, as Mike said, that actually we've already given them intermediate CAs for their testing, and they're working with government organizations. And we can house the routes, and we're ready to go is kind of what it boils down to. We're just kind of, I hate to say we're waiting for everybody to catch up, but we are waiting for it to be embraced, as Mike said, and we're ready to go. But that's kind of giving you an idea that we allow customers to build their CAs here or upload them. They still have to go through ceremony. Our ceremonies we've done this since the VeriSign days. We record them, carefully track them, where every portion of the ceremony is accountable. So again, that's just kind of giving you an idea of what that looks like. But again, customers can manage these. There are some regulatory or compliance features that come in here where customers can't just start making things on the fly. They still have to run through ceremony once again. But again, the customer has a single platform where they control this, and they could still set up their own account policies away from just the the institutional policies, I guess, against the organizational. Any other questions about DigiCert One, the Trust Lifecycle Manager, or any of the containers that Mike talked about earlier?